In today's review / tutorial, I'm going to review the Clover Twin Tracing Wheel. That's this one here. And then I'm also going to show you how to make your own seam allowance marking tool using your household items. And using that, you can quickly and easily mark out an accurate seam allowance around your whole pattern. So let's get straight into today's video. So now I'm going to show you how to use the Clover Twin Tracing Wheel. Alright, so I'm going to lay my fabric out on my cutting mat. Okay, now quick tip, if your cutting mat is smaller than your fabric, then lay your fabric into the corner of the cutting mat, but don't go over the cutting mat. That way you'll know for sure where the edge of your cutting mat is. Now my pattern here does have a seam allowance, but I actually need to extend it out because I'm creating something a bit different to what this pattern is. So the tracing wheel is perfect for that. Now, you need carbon paper. On my carbon paper, I keep 2 clips, okay, wonder clips, and I'm going to clip my fabric onto my pattern. That way it ensures that the pattern will not move. I need to keep this in place. And a quick tip, I have used Scotch tape to cover the edge of my seam where I will be going over with the tracing wheel, and I'd highly recommend you do that too. The reason for this is to protect your pattern so that you can use this pattern over and over again. If you were to use the tracing wheel on this, you could destroy the edge of this paper. So by putting down some tape around where you will be going over with the tracing wheel, then you get to protect the pattern and use it over and over again. Sorry if I'm speaking fast, but my girls will be up soon and it's hard to find time to make these recordings. So I have these carbon paper again from Clover. I'm going to sandwich this between the pattern and the fabric, and I'm going to have the carbon side down onto the fabric. If you think about it, it'll make perfect sense because you're trying to transfer this onto the fabric. Okay, so I have this down. Then I am going to have my wheels out this way, whatever way that is. Vertical. Yeah. So I want 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just making sure that what I have here is 1/4 inch. I think you turn this one way or the other and it closes in a bit tighter. Yes, that is 1/4 inch seam allowance. I got this handy seam allowance gauge for free made by Jack's mom on their Facebook files. Highly recommend their page. Great resources. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Clover Twin Tracing Wheel on the pattern here at the bottom of the screen, and then we are going to make the seam allowance marker tool, and then we're going to come back and use that on the top half of the pattern. Now you actually have to roll over this several times. So you go. So you just go back and forth, back and forth. I remember the first time I used this, I was very disappointed that I didn't see much being transferred onto the fabric. And then I realized I actually have to do this a good few times ideally. So just go back and forth over your pattern. Now, I don't know if it's the carbon paper that I have that's not great and that's why I have to do it so many times, or if this is the norm. Let me know in the comments down below if you know yourself. I forgot to move the carbon paper up, but I can actually see the tracing mark. You mightn't see it on the camera, but I can see the marks left by the tracing wheel here. So that is actually sufficient. And just to show you, here is the mark left from the carbon paper, and that is very clear. Both of these actually work sufficiently well. So depending on what type of fabric you're using, you may not need the carbon paper at all. Now over on this side, I'm going to be using just the one tracing wheel, so I'm just going to turn the other one horizontal, okay, and hold my pattern taut. Do you know what? Okay, it's actually a lot warmer today, and I find that the transfer is working much better. So maybe it's the heat. I wonder if you warm this up with with your hands first, would that release the carbon better? Okay, if I will let you know when I get to try that out myself. So I'm going to remove the pattern now. Okay, so to create your own seam allowance marker, what you need is 2 pens. All right, I have a flat highlighter here because it will mark very easily, and I like that it's on a flat surface, so it will help keep the other pen in place. If you have 2 that are rounded, then it's just more likely to move around and it's a little bit more awkward. If you have a darker colored highlighter, that might be even better, but this is just what I have. And then your other pen should be something that will mark very easily. I have a felt tip pen here, which works really well because you don't really want to have to push down particularly hard on either of these pens. Okay, so what you do is grab a piece of paper and then you mark out the seam allowance that you want for these pens. Okay, so I'm going to mark out in a different color so that I can see it very clearly. So this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance that I'm going to mark out here. So this is how far apart I want the pens to mark. Okay, and then take the tops off both pens. Mark it, see what the distance is. So this is actually already at the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if you need to create extra width, okay, to increase the seam allowance, you can use something like an elastic band and wrap it around the pen and just keep wrapping it and testing it till you get to the width that you want. Okay, I'm using an elastic band because it is nice and grippy. Okay, since this is already at the width that I want, I'm going to use 2 elastic bands to hold this in place. It just makes it that bit more secure. So now I am going to create a pattern of a pajama bottom using an existing pair of pants. Okay, so before I get started, I want to make sure these are in line with each other, and then I'm going to do a check again on the width between them to make sure it's exactly a 1/4 inch, which it is precisely. It hasn't changed. Quick tip, if you're going to clone a piece of clothing and you can have it up to the edge of the paper, then what I would do is I would use one of these wonder clips if you have them, or a hair clip, or whatever it is you have, and use it to clip it to the piece of paper at the edge. Make sure it doesn't move. Some people pin them onto the paper, but I think that kind of warps it a bit. So I like to clip it on and make sure it does not move, because you can get shaky hands, and this makes sure everything stays in line. Okay, so I am going to use my seam allowance tool now, and I'm going to trace along here. Okay. And there you go. Your seam allowance is already drawn along with your pattern marking. It's so easy to use. How easy was that to do the 2 in 1 go? If you're a busy mom, busy person, this is such a cool, handy tip. So you don't have to go around with the ruler marking dots and then connecting dots to make sure your seam allowance is the same all along the edges. The only thing is, when you are drawing with this, you need to make sure that you are keeping the pens level, okay? So that you're not kind of pressing one way or the other, so that ends up going skewed. You just want to make sure you are holding them down at a 90 degrees angle, just like that. Because once you start tilting the pens to all sorts of angles like this or that, then it's not going to be an even seam allowance between the two pens anymore, and that's not going to be useful for anybody. And if you have fabric marking pens, pencils, anything like that, you can use the same trick to create a seam allowance tool so that you can mark directly onto the fabric. Okay, and here is the handy little seam gauge tool we made. Just to point out, if you're going to mark directly on your fabric, then you should have pattern marking pens. Those are designed to be easily removable. I don't have that, so I use what I had to demonstrate for you. And as you can see there, we have drawn the perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance very easily using the little tool that we just made. So I do love my Clover Twin Tracing Wheel. I think it's actually a great tool to have. If you're going to get a tracing wheel, do go ahead and get this twin tracing one if you can afford it. It's great to have the option to be able to mark out the seam allowance at the same time as you are tracing out your pattern. Okay. But if you're not going to buy a new tracing wheel, then go ahead and make your own seam tracing tool at home. This is just so easy to make. Now, the key thing to note is before you use this, at the start of each time, I would re-measure the seam allowance that by marking this out, just to make sure it hasn't shifted, okay? So you want to make sure it's accurate each time. I hope you found today's review / tutorial helpful. If you did, please do give it a thumbs up, a like, and I would love for you to subscribe to my channel by clicking that button down there. It would really help to support me. And do ring the notification bell beside it so that you receive a notification every time I upload a new video. I upload a new video every week, or at least I attempt to. I have 2 small toddlers, so it's hard to find time, especially with the lockdown at the moment. Other people might have more free time on their hands, but when you have small toddlers around the house, you find that you're a lot busier. If you are one of those mamas, let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know who you are and how old your kids are. And that I'm not alone. So my toddlers are 1.5 and almost 3, and it's busy with them home 24/7. But anyway, if you found this video useful, I would love for you to share with other friends. So until the next video, stay safe, wash your hands. Okay, and a quick tip, if you are creating your own patterns and need a large sheet of paper, you can use gift wrapping paper. I would just iron it out flat first so that it doesn't roll.